Welcome back, guys. So in the previous video, we looked at hoisting and scope and how they marry into each other, right? And as I said previously that scope is the first thing that gets determined, and then comes the um, need for hoisting the variables inside that scope. Okay, so let's just in this video I'm going to talk about a few more related things. Okay, so let's jump in. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about, it would be this video would be a bit of a theoretical perspective. So I wanted to understand something that we have been talking about a lot of time till now, which is the execution context. Okay, so if you've seen that, we have been very carefully uh, following this kind of phase-wise thing, right? That there are two phases. First is memory creation and then the execution. And I already told you that whatever we are preparing over here is nothing but the actual execution context. So I'm just going to detail that over here a bit. So basically, this execution context itself is like this entire thing, memory creation and execution, belongs to an execution context. Okay, so this is basically one execution context. I can say like execution context A, and then I may have multiple such execution contexts. Okay, and each execution context will have these two phases for it. Now, first question, when does an execution context trigger? So execution context, as the name suggests, it will trigger only if something is executed. And so whenever your JavaScript program is executed, the first execution context which gets executed is the global execution context. Let's say, okay, this is going to be the first execution context, and this will go through all the memory creation in the global execution, global scope. And this memory creation is nothing but configuration of this execution context. And this is where your hoisting will come into picture. Hoisting of variables and functions within that scope, in this case global. Okay. Now comes the local scope, and this will be as many as the functions are. So whenever a function will be executed, we will have the execution context created for that function. Okay, so this happens first, and then depending on which function is executed, the execution context for that particular local function will be, local scope will be created. And then again we need to configure the context Okay. Before actually executing it. Okay. So now let me talk about one more thing. So the execution context has attached to it two things, any execution context for that matter. Scope is the first thing, okay, which means that what scope is it tied to? The other thing is something called of a scope chain. Okay, so what is a scope chain? And then also we'll just talk about something called this pointer. Okay, so these three are also set for any execution context. So what is a scope chain? Scope chain is basically a chain to all the parent methods in that scope, okay, till the global. So just try to think on that, okay. Take a moment, pause a bit and think about it. So what I'm trying to say is basically every execution context has a pointer to its parent owner scope. Okay. Now, of course, global won't have anything for that matter, but all the local scopes will definitely have that, which means that if I have a function called function my function okay, and inside that I have my function 1, okay. Now let's say over here I have var message equal to hello, and over here I have var message 1 equal to message. This is valid because this my function has a pointer to its owner or parent scope, and that is why it will have this message. But however, if I have a function my function 2 over here, and if I have var message 2 equal to let's say message 1, that's also possible, as well as message, that's also possible, okay. However, and even like if I have var gmessage equal to global, then case we could even say that message 2 equal to G message. All this is possible, but what's not possible is that if we say something like message equal to message 1, this is not possible, okay, because the children pointers are not with the parent, and that's why from the global you cannot access any of the local scopes due to the same reason, as well as we cannot have my function or let's say my other function over here. You cannot have where message equal to message 1, not valid. Okay, so siblings are also not available. So that basically is the scope chain. Only the pointers to the parent up to the global. So that's the scope chain. And then like this pointer. Now this pointer is actually the for all possibilities, most of the possibilities, it would be your window object. Okay, but there are certain scenarios in which it will not be the window object. Now this is I don't want to dive deep into that as of now, but we can take it up in a subsequent session. For the moment, there is something called parent leading object, which is a bit tricky. But we'll not talk about this right now. For some other session. Okay. Okay, so I just have one more thing to discuss, which is going to be the execution stack. So we looked at execution context, but there is also this thing that at a moment, okay, at a time, only one execution context can run, which means that if we are right now in executing my function, okay, if we are calling my function from here, from somewhere here, okay, so at this time we are only having the my function execution context. Now when we move into this, let's say somewhere here we have this my function 1, my function 1. Now at that time it doesn't even have any trace of the execution context of my function. It is totally into my function 1's execution context, and so on and so forth, right? So that means that at any point of time, at any time, only one execution context is active, and essentially that is or that results in JavaScript being single threaded. Okay, just because everything happens one at a time, one after the other. We can never have anything happening two things at the same time over here. Okay, or multiple things at the same time over here. So that's all for this video. I think we are now in a good shape to revisit something we have already discussed in some of our previous videos. So just keep guessing what am I talking about, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.